They tied a rope to the cars to kill 1,000 zombies. Hello all. This is Jacobson and this is a brief retelling of the 9th and 10th episodes of the 7th season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. As soon as this video gets 300 likes, I will release the next part. Enjoy watching it.
Gabriel reads his Bible during the night shift at the gates of Alexandria. He peers into the darkness, a worried expression appears on his face, and he leaves his post. In the storeroom, Gabriel hastily fills the crates with food and weapons. His Bible falls to the floor as he looks through the gun registry with shaking hands. He loads the crates into the car and leaves Alexandria. A mysterious dark figure rises from the passenger seat and the car drives away. Meanwhile, Rick's group meets with Gregory at his office in Hilltop. He refuses to help them in the fight against the Saviors. Gregory tells the survivors that they owe him double. For not killing the Saviors, as he promised, and for personally risking hiding Maggie and Sasha. They leave the library, and will not take them to the courtyard, where a group of Hilltop residents offers to join the fight against the Saviors. Daryl thinks they don't need a large army. If they find the right supplies, they can blow them up. Tara says that there are civilians in the shelter. Rick suggests they return to Alexandria before the Saviors come for Daryl. Jesus shows a long-range walkie-talkie stolen from the Saviors. They can eavesdrop and find out if Negan will send his people to Alexandria. He then invites them to visit the king and Ezekiel. Jesus leads Rick's group to an abandoned parking lot. Richard and another guardian of the kingdom, Elvira, arrive on horseback. Jesus makes an acquaintance and explains that they have similar interests. After some hesitation, Richard invites them to follow him. Richard, believing that Rick is interested in becoming a trading partner, trusts Jesus. He stresses that they need to fight the Saviors. Jesus assures Richard that he has good news. Richard leads Rick's group inside the kingdom, where they meet Morgan. Morgan keeps his word. He confesses to Rick and Daryl that he found Carol, but says that she subsequently left the kingdom without revealing her whereabouts. Richard takes Rick's group to the theater, where they meet with King Ikea. Rick asks Mikkel to help them in the fight against the Saviors, and chastises Jesus for telling Rick about his deal with the Saviors. They make their arguments. In the process, Richard calls to fight with the Saviors until the situation worsens, and Morgan asks his opinion of the female, advises to find a non-violent way. Agrees to inform Rick of his decision in the morning and invites them to stay the night. Benjamin runs into Carol in the woods while practicing his skills against walkers. She advises him not to make noise and tells him to go home, and puts Henry, Benjamin's younger brother, to bed. Benjamin calls on Ezekiel to help Rick's group in the fight against the Saviors and thanks him for his advice. The next morning, he explains to Rick that although the kingdom seems idyllic, they had to fight for it. He lost a lot of people in the battle with the walkers, so he refuses to break the peace made with the Saviors. However, he offers Daryl shelter within the walls of the kingdom. Rick's group is selected from the kingdom. Sasha complains about the difference in the language Rosita turns her down and refuses to be friends because Abraham left her for Sasha. Rick explains to Richard that they don't have the strength to destroy even one outpost. Richard understands that it's not just about numbers. They make the Saviors stronger every day by supplying them with food, weapons and supplies. Rick persuades Daryl to stay behind for his own safety and to possibly convince Ezekiel. On the way back to Alexandria, they encounter a blockade of cars on the highway, arranged by the Saviors. They start moving cars off the road. Michonne looks through binoculars and notices something on the highway. Rick's group finds a tripwire installed across the road. A steel cable stretched between two cars on opposite sides of the road, explosives neatly strung on the cable. Carl remembers how the rescuers talked about the tripwire traps for a large herd of walkers. Rosita is leading the effort to dismantle the explosives so they can take the dynamite and RPG with them. Rick's group hears Negan's voice on the radio, who utters tender words to Fat Joey. Negan discovers that Daryl has escaped and sends a search party to Alexandria. While they are hastily dismantling the tripwire, a large herd is approaching along the road. Rick explains that they want the herd to stay on the highway because they might need it. While Rosita, Tara and Carl are working to block the road again, the herd surrounds them. Rick tells Jesus and Sasha to return to the hilltop, then Rick and Michonne fasten a steel cable to the two cars for the launcher. They ride on opposite sides of the herd, cutting off walkers with a rope. They get to the SUV and join Rosita, Carl and Tara. As the SUV drives away, the remnants of dynamite explode among the herd behind them. While Rick and Michonne catch their breath in the back seat of the car, she assures him that they will cope. Rick's group returns to Alexandria moments before Simon stays with the group of saviors. Rick innocently wonders why they return to the task so quickly. Simon tells him that they are looking for Daryl. The saviors search Alexandria, but find nothing. Simon notices that the shelves in the pantry are empty. Aaron explains that they are having a hard time collecting supplies. After Simon leaves, Rick asks Aaron about the pantry. Aaron and Tobin explain that Gabriel disappeared from the night shift along with most of the food, weapons and car. Rosita accuses Gabriel of stealing their stuff, but Rick defends Gabriel, saying he wouldn't do that. Rick finds Gabriel's Bible on the pantry floor. Then he flips through the notebook for notes and finds a hastily scribbled note from Gabriel, which says, "Boat, keep in mind the boat where Rick and Aaron found supplies." Aaron packs a bag to return to the boat with Rick. Eric begs him not to go, he knows that they are going against the saviors. Aaron tells him that he has to do it. Rick's group is staying at the lake. They follow the tracks to the overgrown city parking lot. A large group quickly surrounds them and holds them at gunpoint, but Rick smiles. And Ezekiel and his knights meet with the saviors in an abandoned parking lot. Gavin, the main savior, sees their offerings and says it looks light. And Ezekiel assures him that they have fulfilled their obligations. Gavin counts the watermelons and admits that Ezekiel is right. Jared, the savior Richard fought during the previous delivery, comes unbearably close to Richard and demands that he hand over the weapon. Richard and Jared pull out their guns. Gavin orders his men to retreat. By order from Keel, Richard gives up his weapon. Jared takes the gun and swings at him, but is blocked by Morgan's fighting stick. When Jared grabs Morgan's stick and attacks him in turn, Benjamin knocks the savior down and orders them to stop fighting. When the saviors leave, Jared keeps Morgan's fighting stick back in the kingdom, and warns Benjamin against wanting to fight too much. In the yard, Daryl takes Morgan aside and reprimands him for putting up with the saviors. He claims that Carol would have wanted to kill the saviors if she had known about the deaths of Glenn and Abraham. Morgan agrees and adds that's why she left, but doesn't reveal Carol's whereabouts. At the archery range, Richard trains to shoot. He gives Daryl a crossbow and asks him for a hint, explaining that they have one goal: to kill the saviors. Richard leads Daryl to his trailer hidden in the woods. He explains that first they have to kill the saviors, but for that they need to do something to move the Ezekiel ore. He stocks up on weapons and prepares a Molotov cocktail. Richard and Daryl are hiding behind a cargo trailer on the highway. Richard talks about his plan to incite a war with the saviors. He intends to set up an ambush on the road. Rescuers who discover a violent scene will follow the trail to the cache of weapons that he arranged in the cottage of a lonely woman. He expects that the saviors will kill the woman whom Ezekiel is courting, and thereby push the king to war. When pressed, Richard reluctantly admits that this is a woman, Carol. At the sound of approaching engines, Daryl knocks Richard to the ground to prevent him from carrying out his plan. The saviors are passing by. Daryl refuses to help Richard at Carol's expense and vows to kill him if she gets hurt in any way. Richard says he would gladly give his life for the kingdom. In a huge dump, its inhabitants, scavengers, surround Rick's group. Rick talks to a woman, Jedi's, who is clearly the leader, and asks to see Gabriel, knowing that they kidnapped him from Alexandria. Gabriel is being taken out. The face tells the woman that if the survivors are killed, the saviors will lose their tribute and come looking for what belongs to them. He asks her to help in the fight against the saviors, but she refuses. A fight breaks out between the two groups. Gabriel has Tamil the scavenger at gunpoint. Gabriel explains that scavengers can take food and weapons from the Savior if they help defeat them. Jedis takes Rick for a walk. Michonne asks a scavenger standing nearby where Rick is being taken. The woman points to the top of the garbage heap. Jedis tells Rick that he has to prove his worth and then pushes him down the trash heap. Rick falls into a pit and is attacked by a walker covered in studded armor. He fights the walker, piercing his arm and leg, and his armor. He dumps a pile of garbage on the walker, and then pierces him with a shard of glass, decapitating him. Jedis throws him a rope. Rick climbs the rope to the top of the pile and returns to Jedis. She agrees to help fight the Saviors in exchange for goods. After some haggling, they agree on terms. The scavengers will receive weapons, a third of the Savior's supplies, and half of the goods they stole from the Alexandria storeroom. Rick returns to his group, and the crowd of scavengers surrounding them retreats. Carol is reading a book in her cottage. She answers the knock on the door. It's Daryl. She hugs him. Daryl claims he discovered it by accident. Scavengers load stolen Alexandria supplies into Rick's car. Gabriel thanks Rick for saving him, believing in him and not deciding that he stole supplies from the pantry. He then asks Rick why he was smiling, why he was so confident when his group was surrounded at gunpoint. Rick tells him that enemies can become friends. Rosita vehemently objects to returning to Alexandria. She thinks they should be looking for weapons to fulfill their deal with the scavengers. Tara points out that Rick and Aaron need medical attention in Alexandria. Michonne asks Rick if he has any idea where they are going to look for weapons. Rick turns to Tara for help, deciding that she went the furthest in the group. She agrees to help, but doesn't mention Oceanside. Before they leave the dump, Rick finds a cat figurine and gives it to Michonne to replace the one she lost. In her cabin, Carol tells Daryl that she left Alexandria because she didn't want to lose anyone. She doesn't want to kill anymore, and she would if the Saviors killed everyone she loved. She asks if anyone was hurt in Alexandria. Anticipating that Carol will take revenge if she finds out about the death of Glenn Abraham, Daryl lies and tells her that everyone survived. After a quiet dinner, Daryl hugs Carol and leaves the cottage. Back in the kingdom, Daryl is sitting by Shiva's cage. He tells Morgan that he knows about Carol. He asks Morgan to convince or join the fight against the Saviors. Morgan refuses, then Daryl declares that he is returning to Hilltop. The next morning, Morgan watches Daryl leave the kingdom. He looks around and sees Richard standing on the balcony watching Daryl leave.